The views and opinions expressed in this podcast are those of the host and guests and do not necessarily reflect the official policy or position of M.A.P.S Media or its affiliates. This content is provided for informational and entertainment purposes only and should not be construed as professional advice, political endorsements, or the official stance of any organization mentioned. Basically, we talk shit. You listen, and M.A.P.S Media stays drama-free. And this podcast is not for children, because we cuss.
What happens when the only message that resonates with people is fear? How can you tell if the message is logical or just emotional? We're gonna talk about that.
Yo, we stepping up now, feeling so proud. Got that rhythm in our soul, let's get this vote. Nothing but hope. Every single person, yeah, we're speaking out. Yeah, we're here to move. Let's go, let's groove. We vote too.
Let me ask you something. Have you ever voted for something that you wanted? Or have you mostly voted because something scared you? Yeah, that's what I thought. Because here's the thing. Fear is the oldest trick in the political playbook, and somebody has been running it on us for a long time.
Flood of illegals, skyrocketing prices, global chaos, and Kamala wouldn't change a thing.
Giving Trump the unchecked power to seek vengeance, eliminating the Department of Education, and defunding K-12 schools.
Fear-based politics didn't start with social media. It didn't start with cable news. It didn't even start with Donald Trump. It started with a simple, ugly discovery. You don't have to make people love you. You just have to make them terrified of the other option. Nixon figured it out in 1968. His whole campaign was built around law and order, which sounded like public safety, but was really a dog whistle aimed at white voters who were watching the civil rights movement and feeling threatened. He didn't say, "I will protect you from black people," but he said law and order over and over and over again, and it worked.
Time for an honest look at the problem of order in the United States. Dissent is a necessary ingredient of change. But in a system of government that provides for peaceful change, there is no cause that justifies resort to violence. Let us recognize that the first civil right of every American is to be free from domestic violence. So I pledge to you, we shall have order in the United States.
Then in 1988, Lee Atwater, the architect of fear-based politics as we know it, did something even more calculated. He turned a man named William Horton into a political weapon. Horton was a black man who committed a crime while on a prison furlough program in Massachusetts. And Atwater didn't just use the story. No. He renamed him. He called him Willie, and he plastered his mugshot everywhere. And he used it to make voters afraid of Michael Dukakis.
Dukakis not only opposes the death penalty, he allowed first-degree murderers to have weekend passes from prison. One was Willie Horton, who murdered a boy in a robbery, stabbing him 19 times. Despite a life sentence, Horton received 10 weekend passes from prison. Horton fled, kidnapped a young couple, stabbing the man and repeatedly raping his girlfriend. Weekend prison passes. Dukakis on crime.
Atwater himself admitted in a private interview what this was really about. He described how political strategy evolved from overt racism to coded language, saying things like states' rights and welfare queen and law and order.
It was nevertheless based on coded racism. The whole thing. Fussing, Williams Supreme Court judge, anything you look at could be traced back to the issue in the old Southern states. Now, it was not done in a blatantly discriminatory way.
Each generation of dog whistles became more and more abstract, but pointing at the same fear. The evolution, as one researcher put it, went from dog whistle to foghorn, and right now, that foghorn is on full fucking blast. Fast forward to now. The targets have expanded, the language has gotten louder, but the strategy is exactly the same. Find a group, demonize them, and tell voters you are the only one who can protect them. Let's go through the current roster, shall we? Immigrants.
They're sending people that have lots of problems, and they're bringing those problems with us. They're bringing drugs, they're bringing crime, they're rapists, and some, I assume, are good people. But I speak to border guards, and they tell us what we're getting. And it only makes common sense. It only makes common sense. They're sending us not the right people. It's coming from more than Mexico. It's coming from all over South and Latin America, and it's coming probably from the Middle East.
The Trump administration's old playbook made fear of immigrants the centerpiece of an entire political identity. And here's what that fear looks like in practice. Not just rhetoric, but in reality. Students in Denver and Ohio skipping school. Fear of ICE raids. Shops in Minneapolis, where Latino neighborhoods go completely empty because customers are afraid to leave their homes. An immigration attorney in Albany says his phone hasn't stopped ringing. Legal immigrants, international students, and even U.S. citizens are feeling uncertain about their safety. That is fear working exactly as designed. Next, DEI, Trump's favorite.
We will forge a society that is colorblind and merit-based.
Saying this crash was somehow caused and the result of diversity hiring. And what evidence have you seen to support these claims?
It just could have been.
I'm trying to figure out how you can come to the conclusion right now that diversity had something to do with this crash.
Because I have common sense, okay? And unfortunately, a lot of people don't.
The Trump administration declared diversity, equity, and inclusion programs immoral and illegal, and then issued executive orders so vague that nobody could even define what counted as DEI. Anything could be DEI. Everything could be DEI. And officials encouraged employees to report colleagues who didn't comply, threatening adverse consequences for resistance. When you can't define the threat, but everyone is afraid of it, that's not policy. That's a climate of fear by design. And next, trans people. Oh, they love that.
It will henceforth be the official policy of the United States government that there are only two genders, male and female.
From 2020 to 2024, anti-transgender legislation went from 85 bills across the country to over 670. 670. And here's why. One NPR analyst put it, even when those bills fail, the politicians who introduced them gets to say, I fought for you against radical gender ideology. And fear doesn't have to be real. The threat doesn't have to be real. It just has to feel real long enough to get someone to the fucking polls. A Norwegian lawmaker compared the treatment of transgender Americans to the persecution of marginalized groups in the 1930s Germany. A Canadian federal court blocked the deportation of a non-binary American on the grounds that they faced reasonable fear of persecution in the United States of America. Let that land for a second. Americans are seeking asylum in Canada from America, and people are voting for this. Here's the part that's uncomfortable to say out loud. Fear-based politics works because fear is more motivating than hope. Political scientists have studied this for decades. Negative emotions, fear, anger, disgust, drive people to action faster and more reliably than positive ones ever could. Hope gets you to rally. Fear gets you to a voting booth at 6 a.m. in the rain. And here's the kicker. It doesn't even have to be your fear. It just has to be fear of something changing. Fear that something you have will be taken away. Fear that someone else is getting something you deserve. Fear that the country you knew is becoming unrecognizable. That's the product. And they have been selling it to us for 70 years. The question for us, for people who vote, for people who should be voting, is this: are we voting for something, or are we just being herded? Because there's a difference, and knowing the difference is the first step to taking your power back. Now, I just don't want to be outraged about this. I want to understand what's actually happening underneath it. The psychology, the emotion, the things people don't say out loud. And I found the exact person to talk to. My guest today is Bob Martin, and his resume is one of the most unexpected combinations I've ever come across. He started as a high-powered trial attorney, and not just any lawyer. He was a mob lawyer during Miami's wild Cocaine Cowboy era. Then he earned his master's in social work, became a certified meditation teacher, a professor of wellness at Elon University, and is now the host of the Wise and Happy Life podcast. He blends brain science, Taoist wisdom, psychology, and I appreciate this one right here, fucking humor, to understand how people think, how people feel, and how people make decisions, including political ones. What makes him the perfect guest for this episode is that he doesn't just analyze what fear-based politics looks like from the outside. He understands what it does to us from the inside and what we can do about it. Bob Martin, welcome to Revo 2. Welcome. How are you doing?
I'm doing real fine. I am so honored to be on your podcast. Thank you so much. This is a difficult subject, and it's a complicated subject, and these days people are so inclined to want to look for quick, short answers, that the ability to have a conversation and stay with an idea for a little while is such a privilege. So I thank you.
I want to talk about the topic of fear, because we see it a lot, and it is not something that is new. So I want people to also get that in their head, because you hear that a lot. Like, this is something that's new. It has been happening for centuries, even, that fear has been used. Do you see it as a political tool?
Absolutely. Absolutely. It is the tool. It is, with a capital THE, it is the tool. And it is not the fear that we are aware of that is used by those who understand how to use it. Our current president, Mr. Trump, is a master at being able to identify the subtle fear underneath the fear that he speaks to. And that is where we can be manipulated, because we're not aware of those fears, the fears that lay underneath the fears that are obvious. And when those can be touched on, when those can be pulled out, when those can be spoken to, we use the term dog whistles a lot. A dog whistle, which for a dog, you blow the whistle, a human can't hear it, but a dog whose ears are attuned to it, they can hear it. And for those people who carry around deep biases, misogynies, racisms, and the like, and all the isms, you might be able to speak in a language that those that don't carry those things as deeply don't hear. But those that hear it say, this is my guy. I get it. This guy understands me because he's speaking to me in those words which I really can't be public about.
So why is fear such an effective tool? Why does it work better than any other emotion? Because we have lots of emotions, right? Like, people love love. People can be addicted to love. Like, why not love? Why is it fear?
It is an evolutionary mistake. Whether you are a creationist or an evolutionist, it still works the same. If you are a creationist, then you believe that God created us for the Garden of Eden. and he created our minds and our bodies to fit well into that environment. But then something unexpected happened. We got kicked out. And there's nothing in Scripture that says that God came down and redesigned our minds. So the net result, is that we're walking around in a modern world with a mind that was designed for the Garden of Eden. It doesn't work. If you're an evolutionist, then for 1.7, 1.8 million years, we evolved as hunter-gatherers, where we had very difficult, physically demanding lives, and we faced dangers like cobras and tigers, but the dangers in those days were acute and they were identifiable. If a tiger was there and he was attacking you, you had to take action and you had to do something right then. It was identifiable. It was acute. It needed a response. You burnt off all the cortisol and the adrenaline that dumped into your body, and then you went on with life if you weren't killed. But today, that same neural pathway that was designed for survival is being stimulated by dangers that are not acute, they're chronic, and they're not identifiable. It's getting the kid to the school on time, having enough money to pay the bills. It's having a deadline. We podcasters know it's wondering whether our guests are going to show up on time. Mm-hmm. All of those things, they affect us biochemically in the same way that danger does. Stress is actually low-grade danger. Fear is actually the response to low-grade danger. And when it's chronic and when it's undifferentiated, it's still stimulating that amygdala, primitive brain, right prefrontal cortex pathway that is designed for survival. And survival is ultimately the most powerful emotion, the most powerful source of motivation that we have. So love can only come when we're not in danger. Creativity comes when we're not being attacked. When we're being attacked, that takes over. That's primitive, it's primary, it's primordial. And for those people that know how to tap into that, it's a real powerful manipulator.
Can we define fear-based politics for people so they actually know what it is?
One of the best memes that I've ever seen that really explains that situation is to have Daddy Fat Cat with his top hat and his tuxedo on and his big stomach sitting at the middle of a table, and a fellow on one side of him has a hard hat on, and the fellow on the other side of him is an immigrant-looking folk. And the fat cat has a plate full of cookies. And the hard hat guy has a couple of cookies on his plate, and the immigrant-looking guy has a couple of crumbs on his plate. And the fat cat is leaning over to the construction worker and saying, "Psst, psst, hey, that guy wants to steal all your cookies." Meanwhile, he has his whole plate of cookies. And that's the way that you manufacture fear, by creating an attacker, an enemy. Somebody who takes the place of what would have been a tiger or a cobra in the jungle.
And I guess this is all because a lot of people, when they hear fear-based politics, they automatically pick a side and partisan. And it is, I'm going to ask you that as well, because we hear it more on the right, but it has also been used on the left, because Super Predator was used by the Clinton administration in order to get those bills passed. So it's not just one side or the other. Is that right? Like, do we see it on both sides?
Yes and no. I think there is a false sense that as good and honorable and fair-minded people, we need to keep things equal. We need to say there's an equivalency, that both sides, have equal involvement in this process. But I do not believe that's true. Yes, the Clintons did say that, but I see that more as, excuse my language if I may, but let's say that somebody kicks me in the balls, and then gets mad at me for screaming at them for doing it. You know, that's what's going on. There is a lot of shame, blaming, a lot of pointing, I mean, the Democrats simply do not call all Republicans the enemy. Now, the Democrats will say we are in an existential crisis here. We are in a constitutional crisis, and that's fact-based. But they don't say that all Republicans are our enemy, that they are the enemy within. Yet the Republicans, based on the language of their leader, say that all Democrats, half of the population of the country, are traitors. Now, that's a kind of language that does not exist in equivalency. It doesn't exist equally. I mean, the extremists on the left may believe in things like genderlessness, which people on the right would consider to be extreme ideas, that trans women can compete in women's sports. That's an extreme idea. But the difference for me is that the extreme ideas on the left don't affect the people on the right personally.
Oh, okay.
Whereas the extremists on the right, Christian nationalists, militias, people that want to overthrow and destroy the government, will affect the people on the left personally. So there is a difference.
But I want to, like, when you're looking at, let's take a Democrat, and you're trying to increase your voter base, you see the fear-based politics has worked. It worked so well in the 2024 election. It worked really well in the 2016 election. And if you're saying that it's patience that they need, is it impossible to get people to stop voting against themselves because of that fear?
The situation is actually much uglier and much more nefarious than we might really see at first blush. Like, if we take a look at the Save America Act, it is incredibly, brilliantly ugly. I volunteer as a poll worker. Whenever elections come along, I come in, and I've been doing that for years. One of the things in the Save America Act is that as a poll worker, if I make a mistake and I happen to register somebody that's not a citizen, or I refuse to register somebody that is a citizen, I am looking at a 5-year federal penitentiary sentence. They have criminalized a mistake that a poll maker may make. Now, I had to work from 8 o'clock in the morning to 8 o'clock at night, and I get paid $56 for it.
Okay.
Why in the world would I take a day of my time out to volunteer to do this work for my community when I could risk going to jail if I make a mistake? And so what will happen is that many poll workers like me, I will be there, but many poll workers will decide that it's not worth the risk. And so there will be less and less poll workers, which means they'll have to consolidate polling places, which means that the more experienced people will probably not show up. And so there'll be a bunch of inexperienced poll workers acting in a situation where there's way more work than they can reasonably be accounted on to handle, which will cause problems, and it will cause mistakes, and it will cause chaos. And so any litigation that occurs after, just like in the first loss by Trump, there was all this litigation, and in 67 federal cases, they found that there was no evidence of fraud. But under these conditions, there will be evidence, there will be mistakes, there will be chaos, there will be things that slip through the cracks. So there will be food for litigation. And so that's one of the ways that they are dealing with this. They are also putting in anti-gay legislation just to get more red meat to the base. They're doing some things that are just incredibly incredibly underhanded. And the and this is what I want to get to. The theory that they're basing this on is this, that they believe that their Republican voters are so well motivated and so loyal that they can literally put any obstacle in their path. They have to get a birth certificate. They have to proof of citizenship. They have to go get the new ID. They have to do this, that they're going to do it. But that the liberal, easy, kumbaya, la la liberals, that they will be blocked. They will come across obstacles and they will say, oh, what's the difference? It's only one vote, and that they will be blocked by the obstacles and they will fall away because the facts are that there are less, the population, the right is a minority. They constitute about 47% of the population. So how does a minority win an election? The only way they can do it is by suppressing the vote on the other side. And the way that they're going to suppress the vote is to put as many obstacles as they can and depend upon the fact that the other side is not as well motivated as they are. But I think they're wrong. I think that with the current Trump administration and with his failure to comply with the promises that he made, starting of a war, the economics that stand, that the left is becoming very, very highly motivated, and even his own people will not want to see him move in an uncontrolled way. So I think that the motivation is shifting. I'm hoping that it has, and I'm hoping that their strategy will come back and bite them.
I kind of agree with you. I think the political pendulum always swings, especially when it goes so extreme. But in the last election, the biggest fear point that was used was immigration. They harped on immigration. They made sure that people saw immigrants as taking something from them, despite what they may have known. I guess here's some pushback, I guess I'll give. Okay. How much is that on the actual voter, though? Like, how much blame can we shift to the voter, even though the tactics, Trump is a master at using fear. He's a master at manipulating. He's a master, I'm not going to say at lying, because he's actually a terrible liar, despite what people say.
Yeah, he is.
But how much of that is actually on the voter? Like, you have to see this, right?
And I think that they have. What he's done, in Minneapolis, what he's done around the country with the idea, I mean, if it was nothing else that the ICE officers wear masks, I think that would be enough to shift people's perception. I mean, we're talking about having these masked, unidentified stormtroopers running around in our country, and everybody is upset about that. What is it, 29% approve? That means a full 70% of the country is upset about those tactics. And all of a sudden, we're learning that he's not going after the worst of the worst. He's going after our neighbor. He's going after the guy who makes me lunch. He's going after the guy that comes and cuts my lawn. He's going after the guy that is working up on the roof there. He's going after these guys. And I didn't intend that. I never saw them as my enemy. The worst of the worst, yes, but he's not doing that. So they begin like a house of cards, like a house of glass. Once it starts to crumble, then that unapproachable, undeniable truth that he is that he is granted, that he is given by some kind of popular grace, begins to crumble. And once it begins to crumble, I think it's pretty hard to put back together.
Agreed. And you deal with probably a ton of different clients being, in clinical social work, where we would never blame the victim. So if somebody is being gaslit, we wouldn't blame the victim, even though your trauma doesn't excuse you traumatizing someone else. But I guess the question that it's still, is Trump the chicken or the egg? Was the fear already there? Like, I guess that's the question I have to you. In order for fear-based politics to work, does the fear have to already exist? Does a person have to hold the ideology, or can I actually be persuaded into this fear?
Yes, on a couple of different levels. The question comes up. I teach a course of law to undergraduates, and one of the sessions that I have is a simulation that I do on structural racism. And at the beginning, I ask them, how do you feel about the idea of structural racism, if you even know what that means? And what would you think of the idea that if a certain people were imposed upon over centuries, would they be entitled to any kind of restitution? And I ask them those questions and to give a couple of thoughts, and then we do the simulation. And in the simulation, I present to them 17 different principles that occurred throughout history, starting with sharecropping and Plessy versus Ferguson, and going on through all the Jim Crow years and the GI Bill. I mean, most people do not know that those same soldiers that went and defended this country in the Second World War, if they were not officers, were African American sergeants or less, were not allowed to benefit at all from the GI Bill, which was the greatest middle class maker law, ever. And they were denied, the opportunity to, join the middle class. They weren't given the college benefits, the VA benefits. They were just excluded simply because they were black, simply because they weren't officers. And so that kind of racism that has spread and ingrained itself into our culture, which, by the way, Mr. Trump is trying to change history by well, I don't know what. I just gotta shake my head sometimes. But when you have that kind of an ingrained culture, a certain percentage of the country is going to believe those things are true. That those people, simply do not equal my people. That my people are smarter, they're stronger. Maybe they can't jump as high, but all those kinds of stereotypes abide. And with that, also means that some people. And here's where the personal tragedy occurs, in that the moment I start believing, or I have been taught to believe, that there are those that are greater and lesser racially, structurally, I also have to believe that there are those that are greater and lesser within my own tribe, which means that I am lesser than somebody else, which starts to impede my own sense of worth, my own sense of self-esteem, my own sense of self-efficacy, and then I just become, bait for a Trump.
Yeah, and Trump is able to say lots of things. Most of what he says, of course, are lies in order to feed his base, the meat to his base. But he couldn't do it alone. It requires the media and also push out this information. How important is it for people to spot? Like, how do you spot it? So if you are looking at the news, because now it's all about clicks. You need clicks and eyeballs. It's about the money. And then now most of the major outlets and platforms are skewed a little bit to the right, or they're owned by somebody who is a supporter of Trump in some way. How do you look at news objectively and spot, okay, this is my fear talking and not logic?
You have to expose yourself to a variety of news sources, and then you will begin to discern which ones over time stand up with consistency and rationality and logic, and don't shift positions, except when the positions in fact shift. But that over time, you'll notice that there's some writers and some commentators that back their opinions up with sources and the like. And you simply have to become an informed consumer of the news. And that takes a little effort. these days. I'm not kidding. You know, to be an informed voter, to be an informed consumer of the news, you can't just sit back and take what is presented to you. You have to become engaged and investigatory and curious and question. And all of that takes some mental effort. But, you know, if you believe that our country is worth it, if you believe that our planet is worth it, I think it behooves us to make the effort.
Very true. And if fear disappeared out of politics, like I would love to see money kind of disappear out of politics, but I'll get off my soapbox. What would change?
No, that's okay.
What would change? Would we see a change in politics?
Well, you know, I mean, fear is a piece of it. I often say that the three poisonous roots of politics are gerrymandering, unlimited donations and contributions, and the wealth inequality. Wealth inequality, I think, fundamentally is destroying the country because, you know, if you look at the research, there are there are none. I'll put it that way. There are no countries where the wealth disparity is great that the society functions well. If you take a look, for example, at the Scandinavian countries where there's a very high tax rate, but at the same time, the people don't have to worry about medicine, they don't have to worry about college education, they don't have to worry about retirement. You know, if you told me, hey, you know, those three burdens are lifted off your shoulders, but you had to pay a 56 or 57, 58% tax rate, I'd say, please, please, I'll pay it happily. You take that stuff off my shoulders? Yes. And those are the happiest countries, the most stable countries. So we have just been misinformed. I mean, you also look at the Eisenhower eras. During the Eisenhower era, the highest tax rate in this country was 91%. 91%. And we built the interstate highway system, and we had the greatest expansion of prosperity and the middle class ever in our history with a 91% top tax rate. So we are just been snowed under by, you know, the idea of free market capitalism. And then, of course, the word that they use to incite the fear, you know, is socialism. Oh, you know, you're a socialist. You are trying to redistribute wealth. But the funny part about it is they only talk about redistributing wealth to the less fortunate. They don't talk about subsidies to the oil companies, subsidies to, you know, all of these government largesses that move wealth upwards. You know, that's a redistribution as wealth just as much, but it's much more injurious to the society than where folks have a confidence that at least I'm going to be able to live.
Because I keep saying, like, if we get rid of fear, it'll help politics. But do we need fear in our, like, a little bit of fear in our politics?
Well, we do, because we need to be afraid of people that are going to harm us. Remember, fear is what we are left with in terms of the neurological components of our survival instinct. So if we don't have that, we don't have something that's going to tingle our little antenna when somebody's trying to scam us. If we don't have that, we're not going to, you know, be resistant to things that can harm us. But it has to be a discerning and intelligent and a wise fear. We'll make a lot of mistakes, but we need to learn from those mistakes. And then also, and I'll give you a little tip from my meditation side of my brain, because fear is so deeply ingrained in our neurological processes, because it is literally our survival instincts, there's not a lot that we can do intentionally to suppress our levels of fear or stress. But we have been provided with a means of regulating it. We have been given a break Like the fear is the accelerator. We've been given a brake, and the brake is the other side of our brain, the left prefrontal cortex, which is stimulated by beauty and awe and kindness and the sense of connection. And so rather than saying that we have to get rid of fear, why don't we say we need to take the time to experience a sunrise? We need to go out and feel, walk, among the trees. We need to take the time to curate our environment and put pictures of our loved ones on our desk so that we're reminded that there are good things in life and to aspire to those things. And that will act as a guardian against being overwhelmed by the fear.
So when the younger generation, Gen Z and Alpha, actually say go and touch grass, that's actually a great.
That really is ultimately the answer. Go and touch grass.
Awesome. So we can learn stuff from any generation because definitely I think we need to listen more. Before we go, I want people to hear more about your podcast. So can you tell us where we can listen to it and what it's about?
Yeah. So I used to have the podcast A Wise and Happy Life, and it's centered mostly on well-being issues, anxiety, stress reduction, meditation, that kind of thing. But, there's a time to reap and there's a time to sow. And this is not a time where we have the luxury to focus on well-being. We have to we are called, I think, at this time to be a little bit more edgy and a little bit more of speaking truth to power. And so I've molded that podcast into a podcast called The Flow with Bob Martin, FLOW, because you need to understand the flow in order to go with the flow. And it's a little bit edgy and talks about politics and culture and all of the things that we've been talking about here with you. And I'd be happy if you tuned in. It's available on all the major outlets and on YouTube. Just look up The Flow with Bob Martin. Or you can go to my website, awiseandhappylife.com.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Definitely make sure you tune in. You can learn a lot from Bob. He has so much experience. His life experience alone is quite fascinating. So make sure you do that. And yes, we need a little bit of fear in our politics in order for us to actually see what's happening and to actually protect the democracy that we have. Because the road to fascism is paved with people that did not react. So I want to thank you so much for coming on to We Vote 2 today. And you can come back anytime. As we get closer to the midterms, I would love to have you back to see how this
I would love to come back.
Cycle.
You're just a wonderful host, and you ask all the great questions and give me room to say all these things, and I'm passionate about them. And so the opportunity to be able to speak your passion is such a gift that I just thank you.